Dylan Cease is already off the board. So where do the Orioles now turn to get its top starting pitcher in free agency? We'll break down the best options left coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, December 1st, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to continue my free agent wish list episodes for the Orioles. And today, we'll talk about probably the most important thing for the Orioles to do in free agency this offseason. That is get a top-line starting pitcher. And unfortunately for the O's, this offseason probably only began with 5 options. And one of them is already off the board with Dylan Cease signing with the Blue Jays last week. So I'll talk about the other 4 options out there and rank who I think the Orioles should go after. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So the Orioles have been aggressive this offseason, right? They've already signed their closer, inking Ryan Helsley to a 2-year, $28 million deal over the weekend. Did a special live episode back on Saturday to break that one down. So if you haven't yet checked out the Ryan Helsley episode, make sure to check that one out. But the Orioles kind of said, okay, there's that. They obviously made the trade of Grayson Rodriguez to get Taylor Ward with the Angels. I think they will still add another bat in some capacity this offseason, but a right-handed hitting bat in the outfield that you can play every day, that was certainly on the checklist. You can check that one off for Taylor Ward. And they did all that before the calendar even flipped to December, but they still didn't make what is going to be, I think, the most important move for this team to make, which is adding a top-line starting pitcher. And it could be done via a trade, right? It doesn't absolutely have to be in free agency. And you say that also because the Orioles haven't done anything like that in free agency under Mike Elias. But while the options aren't as good this offseason as they were this time last year, there are still good options out there. And unfortunately for the O's, we have to start here because who I was going to rank number 1 on my wish list, I had the notes already done and sitting at number 1 was Dylan Cease. Well, he is off the board. In the middle of last week, we learned that the Blue Jays have signed Cease to a 7-year, $210 million deal. It includes some deferrals, but that's still a lot of years and a lot of money. It's something I would have given to Dylan Cease, but it was definitely well over what his projection was for this offseason. Now, for the Orioles, Cease has made 32 starts, at least 32 starts in 5 consecutive seasons, whether it's been with the White Sox or the Padres, and he's had huge swing and miss numbers, huge strikeout numbers. He's 4th in FanGraphs WAR among all starting pitchers in baseball since the beginning of the 2021 season. That is consistency. Just even if you go beyond the numbers, just the ability to post and stay healthy for 5 straight seasons. Barely any pitchers in the league can do that at this point. And 7 years for a starting pitcher is a lot of years. That's a lot of commitment. There are only 5 other starting pitchers in this era who have gotten at least a 7-year deal in free agency. Max Fried, Aaron Nola, Steven Strasburg, Garrett Cole, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Nola so far, I think that the Phillies overpaid a little bit to get him to stay home because he's so important to that team. Hasn't been amazing, been solid, hasn't been amazing. Obviously, the Strasburg deal was a disaster after it was signed, but he was so good before the deal. It was, I don't fault the Nats for making that deal. Yamamoto was different because he was coming over in his mid-20s. Most of these guys are hitting free agency around 29 or 30. Yamamoto was much younger coming over from Japan, and that's why he got a deal that was, 12 years instead of 7. So that's almost in a different category. Garrett Cole's been great, but he just missed the entirety of 2025 with Tommy John surgery, so you're already cut off 1 year of that deal. And then Max Fried just signed a deal like that last offseason, and he was amazing for the Yankees in year 1. We'll see what happens in the next 6. But there's certainly some success stories in deals like that. But there's a reason why there's barely any 7-year free agent deals for starting pitchers, because pitching is a risk no matter what. And 7 years for someone, especially when the back half of that deal is going to be into their mid and late 30s. If you just break it down to that, it's not smart business. But at the end of the day, the way free agency works is not going to be smart business. And you have to overpay what you value a guy to get a legitimate player in free agency. The Orioles need to know that. Every team deep down knows that, but they still don't want to do it. And the Orioles haven't wanted to do it. And that's why you end up with not the best free agents. Now for Cease, the projection was 6 years, $168 million. He got one more year and he got $42 more million. And that was still the highest projected contract for any starting pitcher this offseason. So you definitely start to wonder with the 4 other guys out there who I'm going to talk about, are the prices going up? Are the years going up because Dylan Cease kind of set the tone with what still, it would be insane if any of these other guys got more than the 7 years, $210 million than Cease got. So I don't even think they're going to match that, but it's going to raise what the cost is going to be for these guys, especially because there's only 4 of them left. So will the Orioles be willing to pay that much money or commit that many years to a starting pitcher? That is the big question we now find ourselves at. I do believe Mike Elias and specifically David Rubenstein, when they have said this offseason multiple times, there is no financial limit. I completely believe that. But I don't think that if they said, hey, there's no years limit, and I think there's a reason they haven't said anything like that, because I do think there's a limit on that. I believe that the Orioles would be willing to give somebody $35 to $40 million per year to pitch for them if they really thought they'd be the number one ace that would put them over the top. But I doubt the Orioles want to go more than probably 4 years on a starting pitcher contract. We know their final offer to Corbin Burns was about 4 years, $170 million last offseason. And he took more years and more money and to get the hometown discount a little bit to play for the Diamondbacks, and then immediately got Tommy John surgery. I think the Orioles would push to 5 years if they had to, but I doubt they would ever go past anything more than 5 years. In 5 years, they would not like to do it, but I think they would to get the right pitcher. But you look at Dylan Cease getting 7 for $210, it's going to take more than 5 years. It's going to take a 6th year to get some of these guys. And I worry the Orioles not about the money. I think that's where people don't see this as clearly. I really do think they're telling the truth. Rubenstein's telling the truth when he says there's no financial limit. Again, $30, $40 million per year, whatever it takes. But, if that's on a 3 or 4 year contract, they're like, let's do it. If they got to commit 6 to 7 years and pay a pitcher that much money into his mid to late 30s, that's something I don't think they want to do. And that some of that is money, but more of that is years of commitment down the line. Do I think that is analytically smart? In a way, yes. Do I think it's the best way to build a team to win a World Series? No, because you are limiting yourself from getting some of the best talent in just paying what is definitely an overpay for that player, but it's just what the market makes starting pitchers cost these days. And the Orioles just have to be able to swallow that and know that, hey, in years 5, 6, and 7 of this deal, this guy might be our number 4 starter at best. And at worst, we might be trying to offload his contract because he's a borderline, top 5 starting pitcher on our team at that point who may not even make our rotation. And we're paying him $30 million a year. That's something you have to be willing to live with if you think that the first 4 years, it's going to be a guy who's going to be your number 1 and could help you win a World Series. And I don't think the O's have gotten to that point yet. And they're probably going to need to get a good chunk of these pitchers I'm going to talk about, right? Like, I don't want to pay Framber Valdez $30 million during his age 37 season. That would be stupid. But that is the cost of getting a starting pitcher in free agency. You need to be willing to pay that at the back end to get the talent that this guy has up front. And John Heyman reported last week that the Orioles did have interest in Dylan Cease before he signed. And he reported that they're showing interest in Framber Valdez and Tatsuya Imai. But that's nice, but also duh. Like, I would hope the Orioles are showing interest in all of the top starting pitchers in free agency. We kind of knew they were already going to do that. You didn't really learn much new about the Orioles in that Heyman report, right? So let's talk about, hey, that I would pretty much guarantee the Orioles have reached out to the representation of all 4 of these top starting pitchers remaining. That there's a level of interest from the O's in all 4 of these guys. They should be willing to and should, by the end of this offseason, sign one of these 4. So the question is, who fits the best? Top line, starting pitcher, free agent wish list for the Orioles this winter. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays, they move fast. We're in the middle of one right now as I am recording this. And one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And for live betting, it's the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up. You can even bet the next touchdown scorer or what the result of a drive will be. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. At FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. So let's jump in to my Orioles top line free agent starting pitcher wish list for this offseason. As I mentioned, Dylan Cease already off the board, 7 years, $210 million to the Blue Jays. That leaves, in my estimation, 4 more starting pitchers available in free agency this year who would qualify as a top line guy. There were a couple of others that I considered maybe, could you put them in this group? I think the last one I was debating on was Zach Gallen, but he just had enough issues in his platform season in 2025 in Arizona where I was like, I think Gallen would still help the Orioles and would be happy if the Orioles signed Zach Gallen, but not as happy if he was the best starting pitcher they acquired. If he was number 2 in the offseason, I'm totally fine like that. He slots into one of the Orioles' 5 spots and makes their rotation better. But I think what we saw from Gallen this year kind of pulls him below this list of the guys I'm going to talk about. So let's begin with number 4 on my wish list. And again, this is not a straight ranking of how good I think these guys are. It involves a lot of that, but also about how well they'd fit with the Orioles, what their contract situation would be, and those kind of things. Number 4 on my list is Michael King, 30-year-old right-hander who was sitting on a 3-year, $75 million projection from the free agent matrices done by John Becker over at FanGraphs, kind of pulls together all of the free agent predictions that are credibly done out there and gives you that kind of median number for that contract. But after the Cease contract, you got to expect these numbers to go up. So maybe this looks like more of a 4-year, $100 to $110 million contract that Michael King could get in free agency. Now, for Michael King, let's start with the downside. He made only 15 starts for the Padres this season in what was an overall down year. He missed 3 months with a pinched nerve in his throwing shoulder. Now, it didn't require surgery. It was just kind of rest and rehab. And he did return in August from that injury, made 1 start, and then went right back on the injured list. Now, luckily, that second injury was not the shoulder. It was right knee inflammation that put him back on the IL. He then returned in September for 4 starts, but it wasn't very good. He had a 5.74 ERA in those 4 starts down the stretch for San Diego, and he didn't look exactly like the same pitcher. But before he went on the IL with the shoulder injury, he made 10 starts to begin the season, and he did have a 2.59 ERA in those 10 starts. Good strikeout to walk numbers. The stuff looked good. The hard hit rate against him was under 40%. Everything looked good, looked like the good version of Michael King prior to suffering that shoulder nerve issue. It's a sinker and a 4-seam fastball at like 93 and 94 miles an hour. And then he's got a changeup and a sweeper he throws to get a ton of swings and misses. He really dominates when that kind of sinker is moving to the right. The sweepers moving to the left. They're coming out of the same arm angle, arm action, and guys just can't pick up whether it's sinker or sweeper. They go different directions, and they really flummox hitters. That sinker has crazy elite arm side running into righties and away from lefties. And if you're going to sign Michael King, you're hoping for the 2024 version of King, who went out there in his first year as a Padre. He was traded from the Yankees to San Diego in the offseason after 2023 in the Juan Soto deal. And he was kind of seen as the headliner in that deal because of how good he had looked on the mound. In 2024 with the Padres, it was his first full year as a starting pitcher, and he was great. He made 31 starts. He threw 174 innings, and he posted a 2.95 ERA. He was fantastic. Good strikeout numbers, good walk numbers. It was everything you were looking for from a starter. The changeup, the sweeper were great. He looked like a legit ace for the Padres that season. And before that, he had been a great reliever for the Yankees. He, was a good reliever, missed about half of 2022 with a right elbow fracture. He actually suffered in a game against the Orioles, but he did have a 2.29 ERA in 51 innings at that point before he got injured. Came back in 23 and posted a 2.75 ERA in 105 innings pitched for the Yankees that year. Was mostly a reliever, but then the Yankees converted him back into a starter in late August. His final 8 appearances were starts for the Yankees in 2023. And what did he do? 38 innings, a 1.88 ERA in those 8 starts. And the Yankees came into 24 thinking he was going to be a starter for them. Instead, they dealt him and he was a starter for the Padres. I mean, I love Michael King. I think he's awesome. I think he has all the tools, but he had a nerve issue in his shoulder and a knee issue. Those are things you're going to worry about a starting pitcher, right? That is why he's down at number 4. I think the ceiling for King, you could argue, could put him all the way up to number 1 on this list. Like the ceiling of a healthy Michael King, what we saw in 2024 with San Diego, that is a true, legit number 1 ace. And that is what he was for 31 starts for one of the best teams in baseball. However, you're coming off a season with 2 different injuries that concern you. And when he came back from those injuries, he was not his same self. It's a big question mark. And, maybe the Orioles can capitalize on that because he is going to get less years and less money in free agency than any of these other guys because of the injury concerns teams just saw. For the Orioles, do they capitalize on that? They have to spend less money in less years. On the flip side, can he be trusted to be durable enough to be the signing the Orioles are going to make? That is the questions they have to answer, and that's why he's down at number 4 on the list. Number 3 on my list is 32-year-old left-handed starter Framber Valdez, who was projected for a 5-year, $150 million deal. But after the Cease deal, I would think Framber is going to get more like 6 years, maybe $190 million. Probably still less than the Cease deal, but he's going to get some more money than we thought. And Framber has been almost as durable as I talked about Dylan Cease being. Valdez has made at least 28 starts in each of the last 4 seasons, pitching to a 3.21 ERA in that stretch. And Framber Valdez has the 4th lowest ERA among all starting pitchers who've made at least 100 big league starts since the beginning of the 2022 season. Now, before 2022, he wasn't as versatile, right? He started only 22 games in 2021, but it was only due to a fractured finger. So, it's not like a big-time arm injury. And since Framber began his 2021 season in May after the fractured finger, since May of 2021, only Logan Webb has thrown more innings in the majors than Framber Valdez. He has been really durable. Now, the reason why I say not as durable as Dylan Cease, despite him throwing more innings than him since 2021, he's had some arm stuff that's popped up that Cease really hasn't. Valdez missed 3 weeks with some elbow inflammation back in April of 2024. Now, that's the only concerning arm stuff, but he had a little velo dip there and a stuff dip there, and it never ended up with surgery or Tommy John or anything like that. And he came back, right, healthy in 2025 and had a good season for the Astros. But despite 31 starts, 192 innings, the 3.66 ERA was his highest since 2019. So the effectiveness did go down a little bit despite him being healthier here in his platform year. We saw a little up in the walk rate. We saw a little drop in the strikeout rate. We saw a little drop in the ground ball rate. It's just a little tiny tick down this season. But the nice thing for Valdez is when you compare him to someone like Dylan Cease, despite there being a little more injury concerns, he really has overall been more consistent. Yes, he had the 3.66 ERA this year, but that was his highest ERA since becoming a full-time starter, and it still came with a 3.37 FIP. His BABIP was his highest since 2020, so got hurt a little bit more by some bad luck. And I think you can count on him, right? I mean, you look at the last few years as a starting pitcher, 3.14, 2.82, 3.45, 2.91 were the ERAs of the 4 seasons leading into 2025. And even in a quote-unquote down year, it was still 31 starts with a 3.66. That's something that would make the Orioles rotation a whole lot better with a guy who still has some upside. The issue is a 6-year contract takes him to age 38. I don't want to be paying Framber Valdez to age 38, and that's where the Orioles have to weigh how important is he to us now for the next 3 to 4 years versus what we'd have to pay him on the back end when you'd think the decline really comes. Now, a good thing from this season is he did have a 108 stuff plus. That was actually the best of his career. His curveball just continues to get better. Throws it about a third of the time, 79 miles an hour. Opponents hit 193 against it. Gets huge swing and miss. He, by stuff plus standards, his 128 on the curveball led all qualified starting pitchers in Major League Baseball this year. And then you're going to see a ton of sinkers. Throws about, averaging 94 miles an hour on the sinker, a 59% ground ball rate, gets a ton of ground balls. Jose Soriano of the Angels was the only starting pitcher in baseball this year with a higher ground ball rate than Framber Valdez. If you're not going to get big-time strikeouts, the next best thing, keep the ball on the ground. Generally, the worst thing that can happen is maybe a double down the line, but usually a single is the worst thing that can happen when you're keeping the ball on the ground. And that is something Framber, with that sinker curveball combination, does really well. And he has a good changeup that I like. There's a slider and a four-seam fastball. He'll kind of jump in there to sparingly use it to keep hitters on their toes. But it really is that three-pitch mix of the sinker, the curveball, and the changeup. So you hear all that and you think, well, why is he all the way down at number 3? This is a guy just like King, who I would respect you if you did rank him at number 1 out of these 4 starters remaining. Well, some of it could be, a little bit of elbow stuff last year and his ERA higher than it's been since 2019. But for me, one is the age, right? 32 years old. If he's going to get his 5 to 6 year contract, it makes it an even worse deal than some of these other guys. He is the oldest guy on this list. That is concerning. There's also the fact that from our eyes, we could see that he had a big issue in Houston this year. There was the spat I talked about when it happened late in the season. I mean, it was denied by Valdez. It was kind of denied by his catcher and his team, but we could all see with our eyes, it really looked like Framber Valdez intentionally threw at and put in danger of being injured his rookie catcher, Cesar Salazar, in a start this year. He was upset about a pitch comm call. He wanted to throw what he wanted to throw, and he basically said okay to a curveball and then still threw a fastball, and it could have been a legitimate injury for Salazar. Luckily, he escaped without that happening. But I mean, there's been some other previous instances of him kind of showing up teammates on the field. That's a concerning thing that happened. I don't think it's something that should all out just stop a team like the Orioles from signing Framber Valdez. And I do think if the Orioles are going to give out, their first multi-year deal, their largest starting pitcher free agent contract ever to someone like Valdez, it's something that they're going to investigate that entire situation. And Mike Elias, having been in Houston when they signed Valdez, knowing him, being around as he got himself up to the majors, would know a little bit more about Framber than other GMs might, would have more insight to talk to people in Houston still about what he's really like and how much of an issue that and other things in the clubhouse could have been during his time with the Astros. So I would trust Elias and his team to know more than anyone else would. So if we do see Framber be the signing the Orioles make, you got to think they were okay with what they uncovered. But that was concerning enough and public enough that, he has all the stuff to be number 1 on this list, and that throws him down to number 3 for me. So probably who the other 2 pitchers are on here. At least you might. You may not. Who's number 1 and 2? We'll talk about that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. I know I want to go to one of these games in Philly, and at least I'll know the price, right? The prices on Game Time, they include the fees up front, which I love. None of those last-second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets, every match, concert, or even event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. So it's the Orioles starting pitcher, kind of top of the line free agent wish list here. We've got number 4 and 3 with Michael King and Framber Valdez. Number 2 on my list is 30-year-old left-handed pitcher Ranger Suarez, who is projected to get a 5-year, $125 million deal this offseason. So I'd say you push it up to probably a 6-year, $150 to $160 million deal. Now, I am personally just enthralled with watching Ranger Suarez pitch. I would love to see him in Baltimore, and that's why he's above Framber Valdez, despite kind of being worse at a lot of things on the baseball field. But there are not many out there who are better than Ranger Suarez, not just in this free agent class, but among starting pitchers in general, who are better at avoiding hard contact, right? Some pitchers like Dylan Cease are elite at missing bats entirely. And missing bats is the name of the game. If you get a swing and miss, pretty much nothing bad can happen. If you're going to give up contact because you don't have the stuff to get these crazy strikeout numbers, the next best thing is to get soft contact. Soft grounders, pop-ups, lazy fly balls generally lead to outs. Ranger Suarez allowed an 86.5 mile per hour average exit velocity. That was fourth best among starting pitchers. His 5.5% barrel rate allowed, second among starters, and the 31.1% hard hit rate allowed led all starting pitchers in 2025. So while he doesn't do an elite job of missing bats, 23% strikeout rate, 22% whiff rate, both like around or below league average, he makes up for it by probably being the best starter in baseball in avoiding hard contact. The sinker is the main fastball. It averaged 90.1 miles an hour this season. You don't see that from a lot of guys who are going to maybe make $150 million in free agency, but he makes the most out of that fastball velo. Gets a ton of grounders with that sinker. The location, the command of it is just elite. He can basically throw it wherever he wants. So despite it being at 90 miles an hour, it gets outs. And he also has a big repertoire. There's a changeup, there's a cutter, a curveball, a slider, and a four-seam fastball that all go with it in his repertoire. He throws everything but the slider at least 14% of the time, so he can really throw all 6 of his pitches for strikes. And the 5.8% walk rate he posted this season was the lowest of his career, so he's going in the right direction. It was a good season for Ranger, 26 starts, 157 innings, and a 3.20 ERA, which was his lowest since 2021 and his lowest ERA since he became a full-time starter for the Phillies in 2022. So those are all good things to happen in his platform year. And a 96 stuff plus overall is nothing elite, right? It's because he throws 90 miles an hour. But there's also a stat location plus, which takes into account your command and also how your command works off of other pitches. A 113 location plus, that led all starting pitchers this season. So what he doesn't have in pure raw stuff, he makes up for with elite command of all 6 offerings. Now, the biggest issue for him, besides not getting big swing and miss, is just the durability, right? 157 and a third innings this year, that was a career high. That's not a number you want to see being a career high for a starting pitcher hitting free agency that you could be signing to be the potential number 1 or at least be at the top of your rotation. He missed a little over a month at the beginning of this season with some lower back stiffness, and that's been a theme for him. He made 26 starts in 2024 because he missed a month with lower back soreness. He made only 22 starts in 2023 because he had an elbow strain early in the year and then a hamstring strain late in the year that took him out. And he made 29 starts in 2022, but he did miss 2 weeks with back spasms that year. From 2019 to 21, he was mostly a reliever with the Phillies, but they moved him into the rotation in August of the 2021 season, and he's pretty much been there ever since. So the back stuff that's coming up over and over certainly concerns you, and he's only going to get older. If you're signing a 30-year-old to a 5 or 6 year deal, you have to worry the back stuff might become even more of an issue. But he's so versatile. He's had good success in the bullpen as well, if you ever have to do that for a little bit to limit his innings, and he can beat you in so many different ways, right? It makes him a little cheaper that he's never thrown 160 innings and he has the back stuff and he only throws 90. You're not going to have to pay $200 million, I don't think, to get Ranger Suarez. And I just think, hey, he's doing it a different way than other pitchers are. Maybe that's a way for the Orioles to zig when other teams are zagging or whatever it may be. I've watched him be so good and so frustrating for opposing hitters over the past few years in a Phillies uniform. I want to see that in Baltimore, and I think he would be a good investment. But number 1 on my list of the top line starting pitching, you might say, Connor, you're crazy for this, is someone who has never thrown a single pitch in Major League Baseball. And that is 27-year-old right-handed pitcher Tatsuya Imai, who has already been posted and is coming over from Japan in NPB this offseason. Now, Imai has been projected for a 6-year, $128 million contract. So I'd push that up to around 7 years, 160-ish million. But he is worth those more years because the one big thing he has is age. While all these other guys are 30 or older, Imai is only 27. So you could be willing to give him a couple more years that you're going to give anyone else, hoping that there's more years of his prime that he would have in Baltimore. He's the best pitcher coming over from Japan this offseason. He's not Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but there's some traits in there that could make him a number one over here in the U.S. He's been playing for the Cebu Lions. He was posted on November 18th. It's a 45-day posting window, which means he has until January 2nd to sign with a Major League Baseball team. So this will be expedited a little bit. And the Orioles would also have to pay a posting fee to the Lions in Japan. So he's going to cost a little bit more. But I think that's worth it for a guy who's only 27 with this kind of stuff. And also, the other three pitchers I mentioned, Michael King, Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, all have the qualifying offer attached to them. They were all offered the qualifying offer and rejected it, which means if the Orioles signed any of those guys, they would have to forfeit their third highest draft pick in the 2026 draft. If they sign Imai, while they might have to pay a little bit more money, they don't have to forfeit a draft pick that Mike Elias loves and can do good things with. So who is Tatsuya Imai? He's pitched an NPB in Japan since 2017 when he was 19 years old. He's got a 3.07 ERA and over 1,000 innings over in Japan. Definitely had some command issues early in his career, had walk rates over 11% like every season from 2018 to 2023. Had a few injuries in there as well, but pitched parts of every season. And then in 2024, he threw 173 innings. This year, he threw 163, both the top two innings totals of his career, and dropped his walk rate to 10% and then 7%. Just got insanely better, which makes sense as he was hitting his prime as he was turning 26 and 27 the past couple of years. This year, a 1.92 ERA in 24 starts. Now, NPB is in a historically dead ball era for offense. A 3 ERA is not even average. That's how bad the batters have been and how good the pitching has been. But a 1.92 ERA is not the level you would think, but it's still great. It was still the sixth lowest in NPB this season. He sits 95 and touches 100 with his four-seam fastball. Lance Brozdowski and Suarez, two of my favorites in analyzing pitching, have compared the traits of his four-seam fastball to Joe Ryan of the Minnesota Twins, someone the Orioles should be targeting in a trade this offseason, who has one of the best and most unique four-seam fastballs in baseball and is what makes him really good. He's shorter. Imai is only 5'11", but the velo, the arm angle, it makes the ride on his fastball play a lot better. And someone like Joe Ryan had a great stuff plus for his four-seam fastball. For Imai, there's a slider and a splitter to go with it. Both had swing and miss rates near 50% this year. The data loves those pitches, and there's a curveball in there that he uses sparingly. But I just think with the age, the fastball shape, I buy into what Lance Brozdowski and Suarez are selling. There is a chance that Imai is just a good middle-of-the-rotation pitcher. There's also a chance for him to be special and be somebody's number one for years and years. And yes, the posting fee makes him more expensive. But again, John Heyman reported the Orioles are interested in Imai. A lot of other teams are going to be interested as well. But it's time to go for it, right? You've already made your headways a little bit in Japan, signing Sugano to the one-year deal last year. And Imai I did an interview with Japanese media last week and did say that he does not want to go to the Dodgers. He instead wants to come over here and beat the Dodgers. So everyone assuming, another great Japanese pitcher, he's just going to sign with the Dodgers. Maybe Tatsuya Imai is a little different. And, he wouldn't get to play the Dodgers much in Baltimore. And you always got to think that extra time difference coming to the East Coast rather than signing with the West Coast could be a little tougher, right? It's different for Sugano on a one-year contract. But if you're signing a 6 or 7 year deal with a team, you want it to be kind of the perfect place for you when you're moving to the United States for the first time. So the Orioles might have to overpay even more to do those things. But this is someone that I personally believe is worth giving the years and the money to. Will they do it? We'll see. But at the end of the day, I think the Orioles, I'm not going to say absolutely need to get one of these four guys, but really should. Because if they don't get one of these four guys, but instead they trade for Sandy Alcantara or trade for Pablo Lopez or trade for Joe Ryan, right? If they get this kind of pitcher in a trade for Freddie Peralta from the Brewers, that's okay too. And then they sign, a number 3 type guy to fill out the rotation. That's fine. It still makes you good. But if you make one of these signings, you have a top guy who's around for more than the 1 or 2 years that a guy you trade for might be around. You don't have to be put in the exact same position next offseason. If they feel like one of these guys is their guy It's time to finally invest this multi-year guaranteed deal to a starting pitcher. The pressure's on. They were terrible last year. The rotation was bad. There is no time like the present to go and get one of these guys. And hopefully, as things heat up and we get closer to the winter meetings, one of these moves will happen. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel while you're here. If you're a listener, make sure to subscribe or follow the show. Leave a 5-star rating and a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out. And if you have thoughts on the show, you want to talk some ball, ask some questions, you have feedback on the podcast, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. I will be back tomorrow just to kind of round up some Orioles news and notes. O's have a little interest in Kyle Schwarber. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode. They hired Mike Schilt into a player development role, kind of an interesting hire that we'll chat about. And then there's an intriguing minor league signing, some news on Brandon Hyde's next job, and a little bit more coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.